I post 2 times a week, on Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now let's get right to tonight's case. Tonight we are headed to Kansas. Shout out to all my friends in Kansas. This is the case of Sarah Gonzales McLinn, and it occurred in 2014. So let's start with some background on Sarah. She was born in 1994 in Topeka, Kansas, to her parents Michelle Gonzales and Robert McLinn. That explains why her name is hyphenated. She is the second of 3 siblings. For her early childhood, she was homeschooled and was described as being quiet and naive due to having a sheltered life. Sadly, around the age of 6, she was essayed by a neighbor repeatedly, and he would always attack her in his shed, which was right near her backyard. When her parents became aware of what was happening, they never took any legal action or addressed the trauma with her. Sarah did not have a good relationship with her mother, and ultimately her parents would divorce. During the divorce, Sarah began to struggle with depression and self-harm, and her relationship with both her parents got even worse. When Sarah was 14, she got a job working at the KiIIed pizza franchise in a nearby town called Lawrence, Kansas, and it was owned by a man named Harold, aka Hal, we're gonna call him Hal, Sasko, who at the time was 46, and he owned 3 KiIIed pizzas in the area. Now take note of the age difference. So he was 46 and she was 14, so it was about 32 years between them. Now he had told his manager of the KiIIed restaurant to only hire young, pretty girls. And I guess Sarah fit the bill. Now he took a particular interest in her, and he showed her a lot of positive attention during her time there, and she wasn't receiving much positive attention anywhere else in her life. Unfortunately, when Sarah was 16, she was violently essayed by an acquaintance who left her with cigarette burns on her body from the assault. And these burns resulted in permanent scarring, leaving her a memory that would last forever. She later attempted to take her own life and spent some time in a psychiatric ward. Many years later, a psychologist would suggest that Sarah, quote-unquote, died as a result of the essay. Her identity split and her grasp of reality was loosened. So that's something a psychologist would say many years later. Anyway, by this time, her relationship with Hal had grown closer. He really wanted to help her improve her life. He asked her lots of personal questions about what was going on in her family, and he asked about the scars she got during the essay. He began texting her very frequently and telling her how special she was not working at his pizza place anymore at this time. She had found employment elsewhere. So he wasn't her boss anymore, but they had stayed close anyway. So she agreed to move in with him because she desperately wanted to get out of her own family home. He told his neighbors that she was his stepdaughter. Now he provided her with alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy on a daily basis while she was living with him, and she began to become dependent on these substances. Now, a few months after she moved in, she turned 18, and at that time, Hal told her he was in love with her, and he wished to begin a romantic or sexual relationship. Now, she was not interested. Remember, they had a huge age difference, over 30 years between them. But things had changed with the way Hal was acting, and he started to threaten to kick her out, which would leave her homeless because she had nowhere to go. She could not move back in with her parents because, well, they were divorced, but she couldn't move back in with her mother because the relationship had deteriorated even further. And to make matters worse, Hal told her that she owed him a ton of money and she was not leaving until she paid it back. He wanted everything back, the money that he had paid for her groceries, her dog's vet bill, her cell phone bill, car repairs, plus he wanted money for rent, for past rent, and he had gotten her a $6,000 nose job, something that she had always wanted. He wanted the money back for that. And he had gotten her a butt implant procedure, which cost $10,000. He wanted the money back for that. Now, she didn't want that procedure at all. He had originally asked her to get a breast enlargement surgery, but supposedly the doctor said she was too young, so she got this butt implant instead. I guess there's no age limit on butt implants. Anyway, so she didn't want it. That was something that he wanted. But he wanted the $10,000 back before she could move out. And she did have a job, so he insisted on having all of her paychecks to begin paying him back. So she was penniless. She was completely financially dependent on him. And he said, if you take off, I am going to make sure your credit is destroyed and you will never be able to get another place to rent. So she believed everything he said, and she became trapped. She felt trapped. She needed him, and she realized that she had no choice but to give him what he asked for, which was sex. 3 to 5 times every week, which she detested. It made her ill. She made sure to get completely and totally drunk before they did it every time, and then she would just lay there. So, one morning, it was January 14th, 2014. She was 19 at this time, and he was 52. So he sent her a text, and it said, "Hey, good morning. Thank you for last night. It was good we never got to talk about Sunday. I apologize for trying to sleep with you. Tonight, before we get going, can we talk? Please and thank you. So that tells you something, right? It seems like he was thanking her for sex the night before, and he's apologizing about trying to get with her on Sunday. And he's saying, can we talk before we do it tonight? So anyway, later that afternoon, he texted her again, asking her to put beer in the fridge for him. Now, she knew that every time he drank, they would have sex. So, she decided to lace his beer with sleeping pills. So, she said what she did was she let him have a few beers. Unlaced beers. So that when she put some sleeping pills in one of his beers, he wouldn't taste it because he was already a little drunk, So he drank the beer with the sleeping pills and he became unconscious. At that time, she bound his ankles and wrists with zip ties. And she cut his throat almost to the point of decapitating him. So of course this killed him. And then she used his blood to write the word freedom on the wall. Then she got into his car and she took off, heading for Florida. She would later explain that she went to Florida because she wanted to see the ocean one last time before going to prison. So she knew she was going to prison. Now, a couple days later, the police were alerted that Hal had not shown up for work and no one could reach him. So on January 17th, they headed over to his house. They knocked on the door and no one answered. They looked around, they looked into the windows, and they saw him laying there on the floor in a pool of blood. So they broke into the house, and sadly he was deceased. And they saw the word freedom written on the wall in blood. They couldn't make out what it said though. The neighbors had told them that he lives with his stepdaughter, and they couldn't find her, but her cell phone and laptop were there, which made them worry, where was she? She left her cell phone there. Maybe she was kidnapped, or maybe she had been assaulted, or maybe she was involved in the crime. And his car was missing as well. So they figured if they find the car, they might find her also. And they were correct about that. 11 days later, she was found in Florida. She was parked in her car, or in Hal's car, at Everglades National Park. She was sleeping in the car when a police officer found her. In the car, she had 2 guns, and she also had the knife that she had used to kill Hal, and it was covered in blood. She was charged with first-degree premeditated homicide, and when she was questioned by the police, she almost immediately confessed to the crime. Now, she told them that she and Hal never had sex. She mentioned nothing at all about any abuse. She told them about her past history of mental illness, though, and she talked about taking medications for her mental illness. She said that the one that she'd been taking lately made her feel like she wanted to kill. Okay, trigger warning. neighbors had been at the house around that time and had reported seeing the skinned bunny in the refrigerator. So this really happened, sadly. Anyway, after she had done that to the bunny, it didn't satisfy her need to kill. So she had set her sights on Hal. She told them that at one point while she was tying him up with the zip ties, she had changed her mind and she had untied one of the zip ties. But then she thought about it again and she changed her mind again. She put the zip tie back on and she went through with her plan. They asked her what was written on the wall with blood, and she said it was freedom. And when they asked why she wrote that, she said because she wanted to start a new life. She was evaluated by a forensic psychiatrist named McLinn. And this doctor diagnosed her with dissociative identity disorder, which is also referred to as multiple personality disorder. They don't use that term anymore. So the doctor believed that Sarah wasn't present at the murder. It was her alternate identity known as Alyssa, who was acting in self-defense to prevent another personality named Vanessa from taking her own life. Did you follow that? Now, Vanessa attempted to stop Alyssa from committing the murder, even attempting to untie Hal at one point, before Alyssa went ahead and slashed Hal's throat. So Dr. Hutchinson explained that Alyssa was a strong person, but Vanessa was depressed and anxious, and that Sarah herself had died. Remember I mentioned that earlier, at age 16 after the violent SA that she had experienced. In addition to the dissociative identity disorder, this psychiatrist also diagnosed Sarah with PTSD, major depression, bipolar 2 disorder, and schizophrenia. Now, after Hal's death hit the news, an unidentified mother of twin 16-year-old girls reported to the police that she had long suspected him of grooming her daughters. I don't know if these girls worked at the pizza place or how they knew him, but we don't know because they're unidentified. So, quote, "In the days before Mr. Sasko's death, the mother and the girls' high school counselor had discussed filing a no-contact order against him," end quote. We don't know any more about that, okay? Now, the police searched Hal's computer, and they found that he was in the habit of watching violent, PORN, specifically videos of women who were being assaulted while they were unconscious. But this information was suppressed at the trial due to being ruled irrelevant. The district court judge, Paula Martin, decided that no evidence of Hal abusing Sarah would be permitted during the trial, except for what came out during the psychological evaluation. But that did not specifically talk about Hal's abuse. Rather, it talked about her history of SA that she'd endured during her childhood and adolescence. The judge felt that Sarah's actions were on trial rather than Hal's character. So at the trial, Sarah pled not guilty by reason of mental defect, and her defense lawyer, whose name was Cornwell, would later admit that this was was the first time that he had ever used this defense at a trial. Now, despite her extensive diagnoses, Cornwell's defense failed due to the prosecution's ability to prove premeditation, citing the statements that she had made about wanting to kill before committing the crime. She had planned the attack, she had not been psychotic, she knew right from wrong, so the defense did not work, and she was found guilty after a 6-day trial. On September 4th, 2015, she was sentenced to 50 years to life, with a mandatory sentence of 50 years before being eligible for parole, so no getting out early for good behavior. And this is commonly referred to as, quote, hard 50, end quote. Since her trial, many experts have argued that the mental defect strategy should not have been used as her defense, but rather the battered woman syndrome defense. Quote, it's a showing of delayed self-defense. This happens to women and men who are abused long-term. In an attempt to escape, they will take the opportunity they have to subdue their attacker and leave. And courts, including Kansas, have recognized that this is a special form of self-defense which absolutely would have applied to Sarah's case, end quote. So, several years later, in May of 2020, Sarah had an evidentiary hearing that sought to lower her sentence from 50 years down to 25 years by arguing that her original defense attorney failed to adequately counsel her on the option of a plea bargain. So this hearing was the first time that Sarah ever took the stand, and it was also the first time that any testimony regarding Hal's abuse of her was allowed in the courtroom. So the judge ruled in her favor, and her sentence was reduced to 25 years to life. But it was part of a plea agreement where Sarah agreed to give up the majority of her rights to appeal in the future. So her earliest possible release date is February 1st, 2039, when she will be 44 years old. In the 10 years that she has been incarcerated, she has undertaken the Pell Associate of Arts Liberal Studies, as well as money management and dental assistant programs. She has worked as a member of Reaching Out from Within, where she aims to counteract violence by speaking to high school and college students. And she works as a dog trainer with the Pooches and Pals program. In March of 2023, she applied for clemency to the governor of Kansas. She stated, quote, I wish that I could find the words to better describe how I feel, but I can't because they don't exist. I can only say that when I moved into that house, I never anticipated the things that would occur. I was young and did not know how to handle situations that would quickly come my way. I believed to my very core that I was alone, that no one cared, that there was no help for me, and there was no way out. Sorrow is now a part of my everyday life. For all our sakes, I wish I had known how to unscramble my thoughts and be the woman that God intended me to be. God knows that I would if I could. End quote. clemency has not been granted, and she remains in prison. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. So, for starters, I am conflicted as to whether or not I should say rest in peace to Harold Sasko. I mean, he did a lot of really terrible things, that's for sure. He had bad intentions with a young adult who he had taken under his wing under the guise of helping her and being like a father to her. Clearly, as we see, he groomed her, and as soon as she turned 18, he completely changed. He manipulated her, and he made her feel like she had absolutely no option other than to give in to his demands. Now, did he commit any crime in what he did? I mean, she had turned 18, so there's that. And it doesn't sound like he physically forced her. I mean, he definitely psychologically manipulated her into having sex, but it doesn't sound like he physically forced her. I don't know for sure, though. I mean, she absolutely did not want to do it, and I'm pretty sure he knew that. And he took her paychecks, but he probably manipulated her into giving them to him, rather than just, stealing them, I assume. But of course, giving her the alcohol and drugs, that was a crime, for sure. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Most of what he did would fall into the immoral category rather than illegal. But the question is, did he deserve what happened to him? And I'm gonna leave that unanswered. So what about Sarah? I have so many questions. Should she have been found guilty of premeditated murder? Did she do it because of battered woman syndrome? Did she really have dissociative identity disorder? Did she kill because she wanted to experience killing? And finally, should she be granted clemency and let out of prison? So let's break it down. Was the murder premeditated? Yes. But should she have been found guilty of first-degree murder? Hard to say. I mean, she did premeditate it, but there were other factors involved, so, I'm gonna say I think that a different charge would have been more suitable. So did she do it because of battered woman syndrome? Well, I mean, it sure sounds like it, right? I mean, I would say 100% yes, based on just hearing about all the abuse and manipulation she went through. Yes, of course, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, it wasn't self-defense at that moment. He wasn't trying to do something to her that was going to, kill her at that moment or harm her, but she knew that he would. So it was self-defense for what was going to happen in the future, which is how battered woman syndrome works. So it definitely sounds like that. But when she went ahead and told the police that she had a desire to kill and that's why she did it, that changes it, Maybe she had both of those things going on. That's what it sounds like. She had the battered woman syndrome and she wanted to kill, so she figured, well, he's gonna be the one I'm gonna kill because of what he's been doing to me. And I want it to end, and I want to go on and have a new life. So I would say both of those things go together. And did she have dissociative identity disorder? If I had to guess, I would say no. Because we're always told that that is extremely rare, and maybe it think she has served enough time in prison, but the question is, will she do something like this again? That is the main concern that I would have. Is she safe to be let out into society? So, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found it to be thought-provoking. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I hope you have a wonderful